Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome back to another ilmfeed podcast with your host, Shabir Hassan. I know it's been a while, guys. And we've taken a break, Ramadan in between, as well as, lockdown still continuing and so many other things. But alhamdulillah, I'm pleased to say that we are back with the podcast. We're continuing our virtual podcast, meaning that we're not back in our regular setting in the studio. However, that gives us an opportunity. It's a blessing in disguise, I would say, because we're able to now kind of connect and interact with not just local guests, but inshallah, we're able to connect with guests from all over the world. And today, I'm really excited about today's one because we have a guest who, normally we wouldn't have been able to get hold of him because he's not local to us. But alhamdulillah, we're connecting with someone very dear to me. And he's tuning in all the way from Dallas, Texas, subhanallah, in the States. And is someone who I personally look up to in the field of da'wah and in the field of teaching, mashallah. He is an instructor at Qalam Institute, and many of you might know him through the book that he recently put out, With the Heart in Mind, which covers the emotional intelligence of our beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is really interesting. We'll definitely touch on as well. Subhanallah, he graduated and he studied in Darul Ulum al Madaniya in Buffalo. He's been and traveled to Syria as well. And subhanallah, he's got this amazing story which we're going to go through as well, inshallah. But yeah, it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the ilmfeed podcast today, Shaykh Mikaeel Smith. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah. No, it's a great honor to be with you. Ilmfeed, mashallah, you guys are always doing amazing content. And so this is something we should have did a long time ago, man. The amount of work, mashallah, you guys are doing. I'm just honored to be with you guys and able to discuss some pertinent issues, inshallah, that relate to the community with you, man. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for taking your time out and joining us. Alhamdulillah, it's a pleasure. And like I said, I'm sitting here in London, you're sitting there in Dallas. So alhamdulillah, it's a blessing that we're able to connect. And I just want to start off by just asking how's everything going? And obviously, I know it's difficult right now, lockdown and everything else, but how's things going on your end, inshallah?
Yeah, so we're still in a partial lockdown, you could say. In the States it's kind of interesting, Shabir, because every state is a little different. And so you have some really progressive states, I'll say, that will open up everything right away.
Yeah.
And then you'll have other states that are taking things a little bit more conservatively and being very slow. And I'm in Texas, and Texas is extremely this is a kind of a pun on words, but extremely progressive when it comes to coronavirus. The funny part is they're conservative in everything, but when it comes to this, so honestly, it's been everything's opening up, and it's kind of weird because you want to go out to things, your nafs kind of wants to get involved in things, but your mind tells you, and we've seen a spike in the last week and a half. Texas has seen a crazy spike. And so now it's even more important for us to kind of stay home. And so it's good. I've been spending a lot of time with the family. Ramadan was a very unique Ramadan. It's just we're living in very interesting times, man. 2020 has just been a very, very interesting year for us. And so, just managing, man. And like you said, it's been an opportunity. There's a blessing in disguise. Like, subhanAllah, the amount of da'wah work and outreach we were able to start doing at Qalam Institute was just phenomenal. So, alhamdulillah, we never know where khair is, and we got to constantly ask Allah to show us and let us see where khair is, and take the fursa, the opportunities when they come to us.
Absolutely. SubhanAllah, I can see as well, I remember speaking to you about it recently when I first reached out, and we were just saying how there's so many things that, like you just mentioned, we wouldn't have been able to do had it not been for lockdown. Virtually, we've been able to reach out to more people, in fact, even through like this podcast. Like, alhamdulillah, like I said, we're able to reach out to other guests. Alhamdulillah, I think it's good that we're utilizing it. I think
Yeah,
it's obviously easy as well, you know, when it comes to difficult, challenging times like this. You know, we always look at the negatives. I know a lot of people that are already saying, you know, we're halfway through 2020 and, you know, 2020 is cancelled, bro. And, you know, forget it, you know, let's just fast forward to 2021. So like, what are your thoughts on that? Like how it's, because it's difficult to stay positive, you know, like during
yeah,
these times.
yeah. So you know, in like you said, we were in the introduction. A lot of the work I've been doing is on emotional intelligence, right?
Mm,
And you know, one of the things I was reading recently in the area of emotional intelligence is that, you know, there are 5 major areas of life that emotions matter a lot, right?
right.
Social life, academic life, health, like just so many areas, right? And positivity and having optimism and being optimistic is number one, extremely number one. It's sunnah. Let's start there. Number
Mm,
one, it's sunnah. I mean, if there's any hadith which is like the apex of optimism, there's a hadith that the listeners may be familiar with where the Prophet ﷺ is talking about planting a tree, and that, you know, if
mm,
you're planting a tree and qiyamah begins, still plant the tree. And if you
mm,
think about, the hadith is completely counterintuitive, because that's the end, right? It's over. It's over. Why would I plant the tree? It's over. It's done. But
yeah,
the
yeah.
Prophet ﷺ is like, no, even in that situation, you're planting a tree. And of all things, planting a tree, which the shade of which, or the fruit of which, will not be benefited from for many years to come. So I guess what my thing is, like, number one, it's sunnah. Number two is that psychologically, like, if you don't stay positive, your negativity will consume you. Like, you will
Mm,
be the first victim of all of your negativity. And so, you know, stay blessed and be blessed, man. Like, don't let negativity pull you down. In fact, like, the word huzn or hazan only comes in a negative context in the Quran and Sunnah. Like, so
mm,
we have to stay positive. We have to always see, and that doesn't mean we're always walking around like happy and smiling all the time. What that means is that we're optimistic about khair. Like, we're always
mm,
expecting khair to be right around the corner, right? And so 2020 is not it's not canceled, man. It's 2020 is about rediscovering self, man. Like, if you look at coronavirus and being locked in our homes, man, yo, straight up, that was one of the greatest blessings. Time at
mm,
home, like, subhanallah, it was one of the greatest blessings because it could force you to be closer to family, spend more time reflecting. Like, there's so many gifts that comes from just spending more time with your family at home and being in that environment. So yeah, man, my advice to myself and everyone is just like, always look for the silver lining, man.
mm.
Always. We know the verse, asa an tuhibbu shay'an wa huwa sharrun lakum. Like, maybe you like something but it's not good, and maybe you dislike something and it's good. So that's my main thing, is optimism, optimism, optimism. You know, stay hopeful and see that there's good in this year, inshallah. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah, it's interesting because you know, like we normally when it comes to sunnah, we mention, yeah, you know, wearing such and such clothes is a sunnah, or you know, doing such and such things is a sunnah. But it's interesting how you say that optimism or staying optimistic is a sunnah, which a lot of people we all wouldn't think like that. Like, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ did that, and he embodied that, and actually by doing that and by building such characteristics, actually we're getting rewarded for that. A lot of people
Mm.
don't see it that way. They kind of separate, you know, those two things. No, no, no. It's only the ritualistic side of things. That's what sunnah. And you know, these types of things like building your patience and forbearance and you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
remaining optimistic, like that is actually a sunnah and you get rewarded for it. So
Yeah, no,
I
that's
think that
amazing. That's
yeah.
amazing. I've when I've been working on emotional intelligence and prophetic emotional intelligence for so long that
Mm,
to me it's kind of second nature now. But I forget, like, you're 100% right. When it comes to the emotional side of the sunnah, we forget that that is a sunnah. And the
mm,
same way, you know, you get reward for any other sunnah. Similarly, these inner sunnahs, whether they be spiritual, psychological, those are all sunnahs that affect who you are. And I mean, yo, you take a simple hadith like the smile of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know,
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
like smiling has such a profound impact on you and the one that you're interacting with. Like, we all can now appreciate what a smile is and why that would be such a key sunnah. And to belittle that and to not make that a centerpiece of what the Prophet ﷺ taught us as well would be to cut off a very, very important part of our human existence. Our human existence, which is our emotional and mental well-being. And so I think without a shadow of a doubt, and you know what's interesting, Shabir? If you look at it, the Prophet ﷺ went through so many traumatic moments in his life that he becomes the ideal personality to study when it comes to handling stress and handling trauma. And so to look at that from the perspective of it being sunnah, it can empower people in religion. It can religiously empower you that I'm walking to school or on the, you know, the bus going to work, and let me just have the right mental sunnah mind. You know what I'm saying? Wallahu a'lam.
No, really important points. And of course, again, to our viewers, those of you tuning in, like, make sure you check out the book With the Heart in Mind. It's an amazing work. Much, much needed, alhamdulillah. Yeah, I mean, amazing work there, Sheikh. One thing that, you know, I think, you know, today's kind of episode and podcast is going to focus on is, you know, it's perhaps not the most kind of like, you know, it's perhaps not the most like positive thing that we could ever speak about. It's not something that we generally do speak about, I would say, as well, you know, within the Muslim community. And you know, it would be in the ideal world, you know, we wouldn't have to speak about this, but it's something that has to be addressed in light of recent events that have been taking place. You know, we've been talking about 2020, right, and how it's been quite a crazy year. And you know, subhanAllah, I think the recent events over the past few weeks and the kind of awakening almost around the world, right, as we're seeing, you know, not just on the media, but just generally speaking on the streets of major cities across the world, right? People are literally marching now with the different movements and so on and so forth, right? In light of especially, you know, George Floyd's horrific you know, murder, this brutal murder that took place at the hands of the police. And, you know, a lot of people have been talking about racism and this whole issue of race, and especially I think within the Muslim community, it's really important to speak about. You know, I think again, let's just start with how have the last few weeks been for you yourself? Like, what have you been thinking? What's on your mind?
So emotionally, like when it first happened, when the tape of George Floyd's death first was released, I was numb. I'll be real with you, Shabir. I was numb. And I was numb because this isn't new to me.
Right.
This isn't new. This isn't something that I was shocked at watching. I wasn't shocked. And that tells you that I may live in a different reality than some of our viewers. And what's happening now is we're having a collective awakening to the reality and suffering of a large percentage of the world's population, which are Black people around the world. And so when I first saw it, I was numb. And I was quiet for a few days. And then the anger, and then the optimism. These were the three things that went through me. The optimism came as I saw the collective awakening begin.
Yeah.
The anger was just angry with the systemic oppression of people. The systemic oppression of Black people specifically, the context we're talking about right now. And what I was so optimistic about is the community, and now I'm talking about Muslims, but the community, and even broader, outside the Muslims, began to discuss collective systemic problems, which sociologists have been talking about for decades now, which were always brushed under the prayer rug or the rug. And so that's what I felt when all of this started happening. First, I was numb because it was just another one. Then I was angry. And then there's a bit of optimism. there's a bit of optimism.
That's I mean, that's an interesting mix, one could say, right? Like, it's like it kind of evolved. And I think, you know, I think a lot of the thing is, Sheikh, like one thing you mentioned is that there's a lot of people that are living in a different reality to yourself, right? Especially, I would even say, like, I'm here in the UK, and it is different. Like, we both live in the West, but it is
Yes.
different. Like, the dynamics is very different, right? In the things that we've both kind of experienced throughout our lives,
Yeah.
and what we've witnessed, right? And I think even for me personally, like for me, I was shocked, and I'm just not used to it. Like you're saying, it's another one, right? And I know
Yeah.
we all know it's been happening for a long time, but to see it the way that it was kind of like captured, I think it was shocking. And for me, it's like something I'm still trying to come to terms with.
Yeah.
So can I just go back to like what you said about how for you it's like it's not anything new really. Like, is this something
Yeah.
that you've seen before? Like
Yeah,
something that you've
man.
even experienced yourself?
So I'll share something with you, Shabir,
Mm,
and to all the listeners. So I became Muslim in 2001, right after September 11th.
mm,
And I was a new Muslim. And I remember this clear as the day, like, subhanAllah. And subhanAllah, Shabir, the story I'm about to tell you, the only reason I remember I was Muslim at the time is because I remember as this incident unfolded, I remember I had leather socks on. And when you hear the story, it's kind of funny.
oh
Like,
wow.
like that's the only reason I remember I was a Muslim at that time. Let me tell you,
Right.
and I want the listeners to listen close to this. And this will explain why I was numb and not surprised. I was at home one day. It was between Asr and Maghrib. And maybe Dhuhr and Asr. And I looked outside my window. I saw sirens. I saw like the lights of sirens outside of my window. And I look outside my front window and I see this police officer jumping out of his car and yanking this guy, this black man, out of his car with just the utmost force. His seatbelt was still on, so his car was still moving. It was just so crazy. And I'm watching this, and he's just manhandling this kid, young guy too. It wasn't an old guy, and the kid wasn't fighting nothing, man. And I come outside, and in my head, I just become Muslim. So in my head, I'm like, yo, I can't be a passive witness to violence and injustice as a Muslim. Allah's gonna question me. So I go outside. I'm standing in front of my property, right? And I'm watching from the sidewalk because I'm like, at least if they see someone watching, they'll act different. And that's human nature. So after everything calmed down, he got him in cuffs, whatever. I slowly walk over. I say, "Excuse me, officer," from a distance. Excuse me, can I talk to you? He's like, "Yeah, what do you want?" And I'm like, "I would like your badge number, please, because of what I was witnessing of your roughness with this individual. I want to report this." He immediately grabbed me. He said, "What'd you say?" And he put me in cuffs.
Wow.
And sat me down next to this guy. Now I want everyone to reflect, because as I'm sitting down, every car that passes by, every pedestrian walking by, what am I? I'm a criminal. I'm a criminal. And just think of yourself. You walk past someone in cuffs sitting on the floor. What do you think right away?
Yeah, you think they're a criminal. They've done something wrong.
SubhanAllah. Like, if that doesn't wake you up right there, like, why did you label that person as a criminal when you have no idea what happened? But we're stigmatized in a way that we see certain things, and right away we label, right? And this is something we got to talk about more, Shabir, which is a lot of times I've noticed people in our Muslim community, they'll say things like, well, why were they being arrested in the first place? Like, why were you there in the first place? And I'm like, whoa. Are we, first of all, getting involved in victim blaming? We're not supposed to do that, remember?
Yeah.
Anytime, something happens in other scenarios, we don't blame the victim. Remember that, right? Number one. Number two is that what we're not understanding is that sometimes the person didn't do anything, which is leading to what's happening, which was in my case. So let me tell you what happens next. I'm sitting on the curb, and alhamdulillah, I'm like, whatever, cool, I'll be patient, cool. 5 other cops show up. And this is what we're going to talk about. The whole thing movement in America right now is the defunding of police. And, you know, here it is, 2 people on the curb who are being arrested or cited for something, and 7 cop cars show up. Like, you guys clearly don't have a lot of stuff to be doing right now. You know what I'm saying? You clearly have more people than you need for the situations. Anyways, the chief comes over to me, or supervisor. He's like, yeah, what's your issue? And no, he's basically like, you still want to report? And I'm like, yes, I would like to report it. He's like, oh, we'll have to put you in prison then. We're booking you too. What did I do? Nothing. So nonetheless, the police have that jurisdiction, right? So I go, they take me downtown. I'm in the back seat of this cop car with the guy who was being snatched out of the car. And he's like, you didn't have to do this for me. And I'm like, yes, I did, man. I'm a Muslim. I have to. And we just talk about Islam. I get to the prison. They make you sit somewhere for the next hour and a half. Every cop that walks past looks at you like you're a piece of dirt. You don't know why I'm there. You don't know what's going on. But again, the stigma, the concept, the idea. Then what happens next? Oh, then they take you, they book you, they strip search you, completely dehumanizing you. SubhanAllah. Then after all of that, they're like, okay, you'll get something in the mail with your court date. You can leave. Leave. You can walk out. Are you going to take me back home? You just picked me up from my home. I didn't do anything. No, just leave. Go. I just literally walk out the station. Where am I going to go now? SubhanAllah, you know what's funny? I had to hop the train. I don't know if you guys use the word hop the train, but when you don't pay, when you skip the train, hop the train, you just jump on it.
Yeah,
so I had to break the law to get back home. So I run the risk of getting arrested and coming back from getting arrested.
Yeah.
Man, listen. When you study society, systemic problems in the West, in America, we have the highest percentage rate of incarceration. And amongst that, the highest percentage rate in African Black Americans. 1 in 5, man. We have seen يُذَبِحُونَ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيُونَ نِسَاءَكُمْ. We have literally witnessed it for 2-3 generations, bro. Our communities, family structure, destroyed. Voting capability, destroyed. Once you're arrested for a felony, can't vote, bro. Can't even get a job. Why? Because the government has not outlawed the question, have you been convicted of a felony? If the government simply stops employers from writing that question, you can no longer be subjected to that level of you'll be able to get a job.
Yeah.
And what happened is that the rate of people once incarcerated who go back into prison is like 75%. Why?
Wow.
Because of why? You're like, oh, because they're criminals. No, the system that is created is literally saying you came out now. Okay, you made a mistake. Cool. Let's accept that you made a mistake. Let's say the person did it and they were guilty of the crime. They did their time. What does society say? Society says you do your time. You've paid the price for your crime. You have been corrected. You have been correctional facilities. You've been able to be put back into society and be a member of the country. But you can't vote, number one, and you can't get a job. So now what am I
You're stuck with that. You're literally stuck with that label.
You're stuck. So like, hold on. Now, so our listeners, they really need to understand. Now, one more thing, I'm going to add something. In America, we have a bail system. And bail, we all know, just so our listeners know what we're talking about. If you get arrested, then you will sit in jail until your court date, or you post bail. What is bail? Well, let's put it simple. It's money. The judge will say, your court date is in 3 weeks, right? If you want to go home, we want to make sure you come back. So you have to put $10,000 on the table. But if I don't have that money, what do? I sit in jail until my court date. Do you know that over 70% of the people in jail are in jail for crimes they have not been convicted of yet?
70%.
Because they don't have the money to post bail.
Wow.
Think about it. So now you're literally punishing people for poverty. The point I'm trying to highlight, guys, is like our viewers really need to study society and some of the things that are affecting the countries that we live in. These are things that are being done, have been done, and right now what we're still witnessing as protests continue, we're seeing a collective awareness that people are saying enough is enough. We're tired of this systemic. It's not about George Floyd alone. George Floyd is one of the hundreds of thousands of black men who have been murdered by police, and police have they're not, you can't try them. They're innocent for the crime before even tried for the crime. And so at most we would see they were fired. Like, you killed a man and you got fired? Are you kidding me? So that means another police district can hire you? SubhanAllah. So again, I just, like, my point in bringing that up was so that the community kind of understands what systemic oppression and violence against black men and women has been in the West. And many of the same things exist in the UK.
Absolutely. I think it's eye-opening, a lot of the things that you mentioned. I think another point is, like, I mean, for a lot of people, this is something new, like, especially, hearing about or witnessing, seeing the video of George Floyd being murdered, it's easy for a lot of people to think, wow, this is maybe something new, like it's a recent phenomenon. But you've mentioned a story which is like from 20 years ago, right? Almost 20 years back. And clearly that also wasn't the first. Like, that was just adding to the list and goes way, way back, right? And that's crazy, subhanAllah. Again, at one point I wanted to touch on real quick is, again, because what you're saying is that this has been going on for a long, long time. And clearly, I know in America, there's been a lot of, people who have spoken out in the past, whether it's activists and so on, right? And even, like, what's interesting is your own, when you came to Islam, of course, you read the Quran, and you also read the autobiography of Malcolm X, rahimahullah, right? I just want to talk about that as well. Like, what was it that when you read that you thought, okay, you put two and two together and you're like, wow, this is Islam is for me, like.
So for me, I was raised a Christian Baptist, and I became disenfranchised with Christianity just due to the whole is Jesus God type thing. To me, that was just a conundrum that couldn't be solved, and it really bothered me. Like, how are we worshiping this man? And so that was an issue. I kind of, during high school, stopped being religious because that I couldn't solve that issue, right? And there were a few other things, right? Then what happened after I graduated high school, we call it high school. I think it's called college for you guys or something like that. So when I graduated high school, I was 18, right? And I was working this job in the summertime, and somebody gave me the Quran. And so I start to read the Quran, and right away it hit me, because when you come from Christianity and you open the Quran and you have a clean heart, you're not coming with a bias intentionally. It's all symmetry. It's all perfectly lines up. And you're like, oh, I know this. Oh, I know this. Oh, I know this. Oh, I know this. Many Christians will know some of the some of the Quranic stories better than some of the Muslims, because those stories are in detail in the Bible, right? And so many stories. So right away I was like, oh, I know this. Oh, I know this. But the Quran was just so captivating in English. I didn't know Arabic. I didn't even think, I was just reading it in English. And as I read it more and more, I was like, yo, this makes sense. Then what happened was, the one who had given me the Quran, my coworker who had given me a Quran, he was Nation of Islam. Now, in the UK, you guys might not know too much about it, but Nation of Islam was basically a sect, you could say, a branch of Islam founded by someone named Elijah Muhammad, who brought a form of Islam that was, by clear things, was not the traditional Sunni tradition of Islam, but it brought Islam to America in large, vast numbers. So you were having these huge conferences of hundreds of thousands of African Americans gathered together, and you'd see La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah at the top. And yes, they had some issues regarding their creed and stuff like that, but slowly there were changes that happened. Anyways, one of the things that was core to their ideology was the role of the white man, so to speak. And what you need to understand, so let me just go forward actually. So I kind of felt right away like, this can't be something of salvation if it's only limited to one demographic of people. To me, that right away was like, no, that's not salvation. If God sends something for salvation, it has to be global, equally accessible to everyone almost. And so that's what led me to Malcolm X, because I was like, let me read his story. And as I read his story, it was literally, man, like, oh man, it's hard to explain. Like, people feel like, people don't realize that the circumstances you are born into play a large part in developing who you are or what you're going to be. Like, you cannot deny the environmental impact on our development as human beings. And he had it rough, man. He, got into gangs, got into drugs, got into gambling, got into women, eventually got arrested, went to robbery, went to jail. In jail, found Islam, Nation of Islam at that time, educated himself on his own, memorized the dictionary, ajib stuff, man.
Wow.
Comes out a reformed person, but a person filled with hatred. And this is وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمًا عَلَى أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا, right? Like, don't let your hatred for a group of people force you to go away from justice. So what the Nation of Islam ended up becoming was I don't want to call it a hate group. That would be, if you quote me on that, then that won't be good to say. But there was hatred in the movement. I won't call it a hate group. There was hatred in the movement, and hatred towards the white man, because it was seen that the white man, quote unquote, was the one colonizing India, colonizing Africa, colonizing China, colonizing everyone around the world. Yeah. And colonizing the minds of people as well. When it talks about mental colonization, is where the ones who oppress you, you see beauty in them. Until today, in many Muslim countries, fair skin is the most beautiful color. Why? I think that's a colonized mind. That's an effect of colonization right there. You see beauty in whiteness. And that's in India, that's in Pakistan, that's in many Arab countries as well. So anyways, as I read his book, he reaches the point where he realizes that true Islam is about love and not pure hatred. And so that was like the caterpillar to the butterfly kind of metamorphosis. And yeah, that was it basically, man. Like, reaching this point where I realized true Islam was the way to go. And true Islam would have some of the solutions to racial and systemic oppression in the world.
Wow. And what's also interesting, like what you mentioned, is going back to that story where you first accepted Islam, you stood up, where you saw this man, being mishandled, mistreated by the police, right? It's interesting that it's like this fitrah, this natural kind of, even though you were new to Islam, right? Like you said, you didn't know Arabic, you didn't memorize Quran by that point. You hadn't really studied Islam. You read the Quran, but like, there's this natural thing. Like, as Muslims, we're supposed to stand up to injustice, right? We're supposed to stand up to oppression, and you felt that, and that sparked, and that's what led you to what you did, right? And it landed you in a bit of trouble, but I'm sure by the end of it, you thought to yourself, it was worth it because I did what I could, right? And that kind of leads on to the next part of what I wanted to ask you, which is within the Muslim community. Like, I don't really want to spend this episode today talking about what is racism, is it okay, is it not? I mean, we all know, we all can agree, right? That
Yeah.
racism itself is it's haram, it's a disease. So actually, one thing I wanted to look at it from was more like the spiritual lens. Like,
Okay.
okay, within the Muslim
Interesting.
community, we know it's a fact, and that this is a widespread, we could even call it, and it's kind of ironic we're mentioning this word, but it's a pandemic, right? It's
Yeah.
literally, it's a pandemic, and it's plagued, unfortunately, many parts of the Muslim community. Now, how do we look at it from a spiritual point of view, this racism, and how do we kind of tackle it? Like, one thing you've mentioned, Sheikh, is this whole idea, this perception that the someone who's fair skinned is beautiful, someone who's fair skinned is the ideal, and that is already something that you find within the Muslim community, and that plays a part. So I know there's a lot there that I've kind of mentioned.
I got you. Let's talk about it. Let's unpack this, yo.
Sure.
I think for our listeners, what we need to distinguish, Shabir, is between racism, prejudice, and bias. I think we need to educate the community between racism, prejudice, and bias. So racism, we looked, and a racist act, like racism is now going to be more of an action that is perpetrated against people, right? So we talk about like racism in the community, where a certain segment of the community is victim to certain things just due to their race. Bias is different. Bias is something that is there, it's present, and we normally don't realize the biases that we have towards certain things. Let me give an example. I told you, like, in our pre-thing, like, I speak Urdu as well, so I kind of know the Desi community pretty good. My wife is Pakistani as well, American, grew up here. But like, I'll give you an example of a bias that's implicit within us. You'll hear sometimes, Desi mothers, they'll say things like, "Dup mein nahi jana," like, don't go out into the sun.
Yeah.
Don't go out into the sun. Kala ho jayega. Like,
Yeah.
You're gonna get dark. Now, look, is she being a racist? No. Is she being prejudiced? Not kind of. Not really. Is there a bias there? Without a shadow of a doubt. Now, can that bias lead to prejudice? For sure. She may see someone in a store who's dark-skinned and think of them as ugly, think of them as criminal, whatever, which is often the case, okay? And what we need to do as a community is talk about not just racism, but being anti-racist. Let's slowly go through this. Anti-racism is different than just being not a racist. What do I mean? A lot of our viewers will say things like, well, I'm colorblind. I don't see color. And it's a humble brag, to be real. It's a humble brag. Like, I don't see color. Shouldn't Muslims be colorblind? No. Lita'arafu. Allah has, what is it? Lisan? No. Alsinatikum wa alwanikum.
Yeah.
اختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم. Like when Allah talks about min ayatihi, Allah says one of the signs is اختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم. This is a sign. So what that tells us, it is not ideal to become colorblind, because to become colorblind would be blind to a sign of God. You feel me on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so to become colorblind would be to become blind of one of the signs of Allah. But color blindness in the realm of sociology has another problem as well, which is this. When you don't... Okay, check this. Shabir, as a Muslim, post 9/11 or post 7, I guess you guys had the 7 something, what was it? Like
7/7, yeah.
7/7. After that, were you not, as a openly visible Muslim, weren't you aware of your presence wherever you walked?
Yeah, of course, it's natural to, yeah.
Of course. Hijabi sister, wherever she walks, she's aware of herself. W.E.B. Du Bois, he's an amazing black American sociologist. Amazing, did amazing work. He talks about something called the dual consciousness, double consciousness, which is what a minority builds for themselves. What that means is the same way, Shabir, you walk into a store and you can see yourself through the eyes of other people, right? That is something that minorities, and particularly Black Americans, we lived with. We lived with this double consciousness. Now, why is that? How does that connect to color blindness? When you don't see color, that simply means that you are a part of the majority and that you are not able to help and eliminate the biases and prejudices that exist within the system. Let me say that one more time. Let's unpack that. I'm colorblind. I don't see color. Well, if you don't see color, that means you're a majority, number one, and you're never victim to the problems that are in the society that everyone is experiencing. Because no Black man can be colorblind. No hijabi can be colorblind. Give me an example. Like, because they're like, no, I walk in the store, I see how everyone looks at me. So the point I'm trying to highlight here with this is that, yes, you're right. It's a spiritual problem. We're going to get to that. But what I wanted our listeners to understand is that many times when Ammi Ji just says, "Dup me ne jana," or, something like that, a bias towards a Black person, we as a younger woke community, we have to call out our family members and be like, yo, mom, that's not, you can't say that. Dup me ne jana, kala ho jayega. You gotta be like, so what? Like, is there something wrong with being dark complexion, mom? What's wrong with that? And then when she's like, well, that's not khubsurat, you'd be like, well, who said that? Who defined beauty as white? Right? So that's the thing that we as the woke community have to fight against, those beauty norms that have been pushed upon us, which for the most part say that dark skin is not a beauty norm. It's not beautiful. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, which is color blindness, number one, racism, prejudice, and bias. To be anti-racist, listen to this. To be anti-racist is to actively fight within yourself and others against racist tendencies. Shabir, Ustad, you brought up a good point. You were like, yo, let's look at the spiritual. So where is, obviously, everyone knows this, where's the first example of racism in our Quran and Sunnah?
You're going to find it in the story of Iblis.
Yeah, that's it, right? Where he says, Ana khayrun min, I'm made from fire, made from clay. Now, I need us to really, really contemplate on this, because the Prophet ﷺ, he said that in a hadith that shaitan is so close to human beings that he like flows in our blood. And so I guess what I want our community to kind of reflect upon is that shaitan never sleeps, man. He's always trying to cause corruption in our community, throw us off our equilibrium. And so fighting against racism is something that you have to. Let me give an example real quick. I was imam at a masjid for like 5 years. And in Ramadan, when all the community comes together, every Ramadan we have the same problem. As the kids would be playing with each other, some non-Black kid would say to a Black kid something about his skin color. And that would get elevated. I'm the imam, and imams handle everything, I guess, right? So I would have to talk to the parents, and the parents would go, we never talk about that stuff. We never. And I would have to say, but have you ever had a Black man at your house? See, you think we're just not racist, but you forget shaitan exists. See, you get what I'm saying? It's like we live in this ideal world where if I don't go that direction, I'm okay. Where it's like, no. Oh, well, hold on. Did you do anything to fight against that? Do you have any close Black friends that your daughter or your son will see you hanging out with, chilling with, joking with, on the phone with, coming over to eat? Do you understand? We have to work on being anti-racist. And so again, the core of this sickness is kibr. Obviously, is arrogance. It has a satanic belief beginning to it. And I know many times when you start talking about spirituality, then many times it's really cliche for much of the Muslim community. They're like, okay, here we go. Now we're back at just clean your heart.
Yeah.
And I want to stop for a moment though, Shabir, because that's not fair. You know why? We as Muslims have cures for societal illnesses, and racism is an illness. It is a marad in the heart.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the Prophet called it a form of jahiliyyah. Yes, we have a cure. And on the individual level, the cure is to rid your heart of arrogance and this feeling of ananiya. I am something amazing. I am something amazing. Yeah. And so on the individual level, that is the cure. And if we work on the individual level, then we can start to address how we can systemically in our masajid kind of work to remove these biases in the community. But on the lowest level, man, you're right, man. It's a spiritual disease, and we really need to work on spiritually ridding ourselves actively. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, okay, let me give an example, Shabir. You know how in your house, every now and then, your house just gets like dusty and dirty?
Yeah.
Like, you didn't bring dirt into the house. You didn't actively bring dirt into the house. But, I opened my computer up. I'm like, dang, where'd all this dust come from? Right? Mm-hmm. And I was using it yesterday, but it's still all dusty today. Same way, we really have to think about the heart. You don't have to actively be out there being racist for dust to accumulate on the heart. Mm-hmm. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
But you have to actively, regularly clean it, wipe it off in order to keep it at its natural state.
Yeah. How at the beginning when we said that no one ever thinks of optimism as a sunnah, it's similar to like racism. Like no one puts it in the haram list. Like, we'll put like, murdering an innocent there. We'll put, disobeying the parents there. We'll put zina there. But no one puts like, arrogance, racism, these types of feelings towards your fellow. Like no one really puts it there. And I think that's kind of part of the problem, because we're just not, like when you don't acknowledge a problem, you just never see it. You just never see it. And only when someone speaks about it, you're like, oh yeah. Like, you gave the example of those kids in the masjid, you had to speak to their parents. I bet when you spoke to them, they're like, yeah, it's a good point. Like, I never would have thought of my kids hanging around with another black kid. Look, I never would have thought about me, myself, having black friends. And even when it comes to like the deen, like, the kind of knowledge side of things, like ulama, as an example, we always think, Shaykh has to be, Arab, or Shaykh has to be, like from such and such place, like, from the Middle East or from Saudi, in order for them to be a Shaykh. Like, how many shuyukh are coming from? No, it must be like do you see what I mean?
Yo, don't get me started, bro. Yo. Oh, man. So, we got to talk about this, man.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Certain cultures think that they own a monopoly on Islam. And if you're going to be true Muslims, you got to eat, talk, walk, look like them. It is so messed up. Like, let me give an example. And check this. I was on Instagram, and I guess this one girl, she has like a TikTok like account. And it's just for comedy. Mashallah, she just does like one of those comedy TikTok things where just funny things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this particular meme, I don't know the sister. If she listens to this, may Allah guide us all. But basically, the camera was like, underneath it was like, when non-Arabs see an Arab bathroom, and she highlighted the bidet, right? The bidet that you use to spray, right? When you do istinja, right? And then the joke goes on, like they're like spraying their face or whatever. She just makes a joke out of it. But when she says what non-Arabs think when they see this bidet, right? She doesn't realize, as a hijabi, she doesn't realize when she says non-Arabs, you are literally canceling out every other Muslim that uses water to clean themselves, as if they don't do that too. So it's so ingrained. It's like, hello, like, imagine someone from Africa, like, I use that too. So I got to be Arab to use that? Like, and it's a joke to her, but she doesn't even realize how biased like, Islam means you talk like me. So one day, like, my daughter, she's only like 6. And it wasn't really hard, but it's the microaggressions. So she's at the Sunday school thing. And one of the other Sunday school girls, everyone there is Arab. So one of the Sunday schools like, are you Arabi? Are you Arabi? And they're only like 6, 7. I'm like, are you Arabi? And my daughter's like, huh? Arabi? Like, I'm Muslim. Like, we're all Muslim. Yeah. Like, yo, what? Man, it's just sad, man, because you think, and it makes sense because, you know, I'm on the other side of the pond, right? So on this side, we're kind of disconnected from the rest of the world. And you guys in UK, you're like really close to other countries. But for us, it's a bit different. You know what I mean? But like these countries that feel like their representation of Islam is the authentic interpretation and representation of Islam. And so if an imam got up on the minbar wearing some proper African clothing of a sheikh, how would everyone in the masjid look? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's he wearing? Why is is that Islamic clothing? Like, your little mind is so like, this is this big. This is what Islam is. This is how big Islam is. There's no other authentic representation of Islam. And not only that, when this girl in this video goes, what non-Arabs think, if she put non-Muslims, that would have been great. Every Muslim would have been like, I got one of those in my bathroom too. But when you say non-Arabs, it's like, dang, you want to X us all out. And Bachati, man, she doesn't even realize. I swear, I guarantee she doesn't realize that that's racist. 100%.
She probably doesn't.
She doesn't. She's like, oh, if you're not Arab, why would you have one of these? It's like, because I'm Muslim too and I'm not Arab. You know what I mean?
You know, can I come to something you shared on social media not too long ago about Malcolm X, about if you were to give a khutbah in your masjid today, like today, 2020, if Malcolm X was to come as your khatib, as your imam, right, what would our perceptions be? Like, I know we talk about him now, and generally, alhamdulillah, you know, Muslims, you know, we recognize him for who he is and the work they did. But if he actually was alive today, as a khatib, and he came and he delivered, like, would we think to ourselves, you know, hold on, is he a sheikh? Like, you know, what was he wearing? His Arabic, I don't know, is a bit da'if, you know, like it's not. So tell us a bit about like that when you posted that. Oh man,
so in UK, I'll be real. I have a lot of friends in UK scholars. Yeah, it's way more polemical in UK. Yo, we don't roll like that in the States. You guys are, in my estimation, Shavir, polemics like to the roof.
Yeah,
like my group, your group. Oh, he said one word wrong. He's off the minhaj. Oh, he said one thing wrong. He's off the Ahl Sunnah. Nah, y'all crazy, man. It's crazy. I'm in a UK WhatsApp group with ulama, and I'm like, where's the sensitivity? Where's the emotions? Are you guys like okay?
Yeah. I think I'm in the same one, by the way, because I've seen your.
Are you?
I've seen you jumping in from time to time. So
I'm like, why are we talking about this right now? Are you kidding me? Yeah. Anyways. So what I was bringing up is like basically like, okay, he wouldn't have had the greatest Arabic. Okay, he wouldn't have had the greatest fiqh opinions or whatever, right? But he is someone who, you know, is a leader and guided millions of people to the deen straight up and was fighting against oppression at the front and martyred, killed because of that. And my point is, here's why I'm saying it though. In UK, there may be inner city masajid that have great imams that will never be invited to the other masjids to give khutbah because they don't fit the profile of people of knowledge. And so my intention is like, look, reach out to those other imams of other communities, bring them into your community, let him get up and give a talk, right? You know, if your fiqh opinion says that his Arabic is so bad he can't lead the prayer, okay, maybe someone else leads the prayer, but let him speak. Let the people see him as a leader. Let your community see other people as leaders too. And it was just frustrating to me because a lot of our communities are like posting all this stuff on Malcolm X. But I guarantee, man, I know these communities. If they asked him to give a khutbah, then one of the imams on that board would be like, nah, yo, his Arabic, hey, lahna jelly. You know what I mean? It's not
Mhm.
working. You know what I mean? Like, no, we can't.
Yeah.
And I understand. Like, I studied the deen. You know, I teach. You know, Jalalain, Abu Dawud. I understand. I get it. But sometimes I think people are missing the bigger picture in society, and they just are very, very entrenched and rigid in their outlook on preservation. The deen, they look at preservation of the deen as preservation of my interpretation of the deen, not preservation of the deen.
Yeah, I think coming back to, I mean, linking it in with what you're saying about, what we're talking about right now with Malcolm X, I think that kind of shows with everything that's been going on recently, like a lot of the questions that you've probably been getting and the questions that I've definitely been getting myself, in light of everything that's been happening, like where the focus should be. Like you've been talking about the systemic oppression. We're talking about racism. We're talking about race here. We're talking about all of these very kind of like important issues, right? But then like the questions that I get is, oh, but is protesting okay though? And it's like, oh man, like it's not do you see what I'm trying to say? It's like, it's not the time right now for that conversation,
Yeah,
bro. Like
yeah,
we're having a far more important conversation here right now. Please do not take us away from,
yeah.
this current
So,
issue. Don't take the spotlight away.
oh man, yeah. I don't even respond. You know, as someone who studied the deen, and I
Mm,
understand, like, alhamdulillah, whatever little knowledge I've had, alhamdulillah, it's Allah's blessing. We can always learn more. But if
mm,
someone's asking a question, is protesting? I got one in Instagram. Someone asked me. I was like, okay, let me ask it in a different way.
yeah.
Is it halal to stand up to injustice?
Mm,
Is social deviance allowed in our society?
yeah.
And from a sociological perspective, there are a lot of people who will take some opinions and say, look, social deviance,
Hmm.
protesting, so social deviance means to break the law on purpose,
Yeah.
like to go against the grain. Some of these scholars will be like, no, you can't do that because we're supposed to obey. You're supposed to obey with justice, but when you see injustice, then you have to do what you can below anarchy to correct the wrongs,
Hmm.
right? And so, protests cause change. If you make any type of protest. Now many of us, when we say protest, we don't understand that word is broad. It doesn't
Mm,
just mean walking around with a sign. I know many people feel, what's the point? I'm going to walk around with a sign for an afternoon and go back to work the next day. Well, that's not the spirit of the protest. The spirit of the protest is that it should be an ongoing thing of showing your dissatisfaction and your fed upness, I guess is a word, with the status quo. And so I agree in the fact that, like, a lot of people are not as Muslims, we're like, you're
mm,
missing the opportunity to be standing on the right side of this moment in history. You're going to sit
absolutely.
back and debate whether you can protest or not. Good. Go for it. I love it. I love you for these debates. Go at it. Sit in your ivory tower and debate these things. We're going to be on the streets and we're going to be changing people's lives. All right? We're going to be changing
Absolutely.
people's lives. And our hope is that Allah and the Prophet will be pleased with the struggle that we're standing. I would use one proof for protests. Kunu qawwamina bilqis.
Hmm.
Kunu qawwam. What does qawwam literally mean? Stand up.
Stand up. Yeah.
All we're asking you is come and stand up in the street with us. Oh, the riots, right? Okay, hold on. You're changing the subject. We're not talking about rioting.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're talking about anarchy. I'm not talking about that.
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm saying kunu qawamin. Be someone who stands up for justice. Is that what we're doing? That's all I'm doing here. I'm standing up, showing the world that I'm standing up for what is correct.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, I again, you want to sit in the ivory tower and debate that stuff? Your WhatsApp groups are a great place for you. Good, great, go
Mm.
at it. But on the streets, we want to see change. And the
Yeah.
Zoomers are not going to sit there and have those debates, man. The Zoomers they're going to want to see people who are a part of the society.
Yeah.
Zoomer Muslims. I'm talking about Muslim Zoomers. Like,
Mm.
they want to see people who are a part of the society that have solutions to the problems of our society. And
Absolutely.
yeah, man, it's a tough time though. Like, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
hate on
Yeah. Yeah.
nobody.
Of
Shabir, like,
course.
I love the Muslims, man. Like, I have friends and colleagues that are like, yo, man, I don't do all that stuff, like whatever. I'm like, cool, alhamdulillah, and there's good in everyone. Fi kullin khair, but that's my personal take on it. Kunu qawamina, stand up, do what you can. There's other forms of protest too. Like there's other ways to do it, sign a petition, do what you can,
Absolutely. Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
it's important points. I think it's good we clarified, and obviously it's good that, at the end of the day, we're having these discussions because it's important and it's relevant, and we're not singling people out here, and we're not like
Yeah.
calling people out. It's just stuff that has to be done. I think. I want to kind of conclude with some last points. I've actually got a class to go to very 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 shortly. So
Okay, cool.
I'd love to continue the conversation. No, I just wanted to conclude with, like, alhamdulillah, we've discussed loads of different things. We've spoken about racism, we've spoken about bias, we've spoken about within the Muslim community, and so many different things. Like, let's end with something practical to take away for all of our listeners and viewers, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, khair, like we've learned, alhamdulillah, through today's 1 hour podcast, I've learned something new. I've even perhaps learned something new about myself that I didn't know, and something that I need to work on. And that's okay. Like, we're all working on ourselves spiritually and so on. But like, okay, great. What can I do next? Like, I know you've mentioned a few things already. Like, you call it out if you see it, even your own mother, within your own family, you call it out, and you start from your home. But like, what last few things would you say on a personal level,
Okay.
on a
Got you.
community level?
Yeah. So this is
Yeah.
what we need to do as a community. Bismillah. Number one, education. Education. We
Yeah.
need everyone studying their society from sociological perspective, understand the systemic things that are being done against certain segments of the community. Just that's the idea of being woke. Don't be
Yeah.
ghafil, be dhakir, be someone who is mindful, yaqadha, awake and aware of what's going on. So be informed and awake. Number one. Number two, and I know it's cliche, but I'm going to say it. You got to focus on cleaning your heart. You got to learn how to clean your heart. You got to study Ghazali. You got to study Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. You got to sit with a sheikh that can read these books with you. You got to learn how to identify arrogance in your heart and biases in your heart. And a lot of that comes through spending more time by yourself in reflection, in meditation, and in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sounds cliche, but this is a cure that Islam gives for addressing arrogance in the heart, which is the source of that racism. The other thing is a communal level. Or no, family. Let's move to family. Family, don't allow for biases and prejudice and racism to exist in your family gatherings. Those jokes, those things, be the oddball, call it out. Just the same way some families, you got to be the oddball and pray salah. Same way you got to be the oddball and call out racism in your family. Third is on a societal level. Listen, I know everyone says, what about Philistine? What about India? What about this? Listen, we have to be concerned with every form of oppression. We have to try our best to do whatever we can to inform, influence, and show our non-complacency with all oppression around the world. With that said, you have a right on you by the place you live in to work for justice in your proximity. Like the closest place to you has a haqq to you. Same way with zakat. I'll just give a quick example. The scholars say, should you give zakat closely or further away? Well, generally it should be closest. Solve the issues around you first. Like work on that. And so what I'm going to try to say here is just work on the communal level in your country. For you, it's UK. For me, it's the US. Do what you can to elect the correct people. I know you guys got some scholars who will say, can we vote or not? I ain't even getting into that. But anyways, elect people on a local level. I'm talking about the local dude that's going to affect school policy in your area. Like work to elect people that aligned the most, not always, the most with what we see as ideal and what we want to strive for as just and upright. That's the most we can do, brothers and sisters. After that, we turn to Allah. We plant the seed even if Qiyamah is beginning. And I hope, inshallah, that this session in this podcast was something that inspired hope, brought awareness, was uncomfortable, but uncomfortability is where growth happens too. So I'm hoping that this was something that benefited everyone, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah. No, I definitely myself benefited. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh Mikaeel, for your
Thanks for
time.
having me.
And yeah, I mean, this is the first time you've joined us on ilmfeed, but I hope it's not the last. Definitely.
Definitely not. Definitely
Yeah,
not.
yeah. We've got more planned, inshallah. So
Inshallah.
thank you
Inshallah.
so much once
You
again,
too.
and thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in. Like Sheikh Mikaeel said, some points may have been a bit uncomfortable, but that was much needed, and it's much needed for myself as well to have these conversations. Once again, check out the great work that Sheikh Mikaeel is doing, especially with his book, With the Heart in Mind. Qalam Institute in the US, for those of you that live there. There's, even if you don't live in the US, there's mashallah a lot going on online as well with the live
Yes. Yes.
streams. And on the Ilm Feed side of things, like I said, inshallah, we're hoping to get more podcasts out going forward, inshallah, after today's one. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel on iTunes and everywhere else. You guys know the deal, inshallah. From myself, Shabir, from Sheikh Mikaeel, that is all we have time for today. But we will see you next time, inshallah. Take care of yourselves. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.